Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. You know, I talked to some of my colleagues about whether or not they were going to preach a sermon today. After that story, in many churches, they take a meditation time. I've opted not to do that. And the reason is because bad things happen when good people do nothing. Bad things happen when good people do nothing. And you just heard about that. The triumph and the tragedy. Jesus comes in from Bethany after being with Martha and raising Lazarus from the dead, Martha and Mary. He comes into Jerusalem triumphant. And we went from the hosannas you heard the kids saying as you came in to the crucifixion that you just heard. And there's a classic novel called The Robe. It's by Lloyd C. Douglas, and it has a character in it called Marcellus. And it's non-fictional, but it's fictional, but he becomes enamored with Jesus. And during his time in Judea, Marcellus often wrote to his fiancée, Diana, back in Rome, and he told her about Jesus. He told her about his teaching. He told her about his miracles. And then he told her of the crucifixion. And then he told her about the resurrection. And finally, he informed her that he had decided to become a disciple of the one called Jesus the Christ. And in her response, Diana said, "What I feared most was that this might affect you. It's a beautiful story. Let it remain so. We don't have to do anything about it, do we? Bad things happen when good people do nothing." Palm Sunday and Good Friday, the triumph and the tragedy. You know, Jesus was welcome in the New Testament society so long as he fed people, he healed people, he preached and taught quietly in the hinterlands. As long as that was the case, he posed no threat to anyone. He might have been a little irritation, but he wasn't a threat to either the political or the religious establishment of the time. And yet, as his ministry progressed, he chose to go to Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the political and religious and cultural center of the Hebrew nation. It was the center of the New Testament life, the Hebrew culture, both political and religious, and it was based on the Old Covenant. At least that's what we call it today. A covenant is a contract between two parties and binding upon both. The Old Covenant was a contract between God and the Israelites. And as with most covenants, it was sealed by blood. That was the tradition. Remember what it meant to be blood brothers? This would be some of our Western movies, if you will, how erroneously they portrayed the Indian. But remember when they sliced their hands and they became blood brothers, it was this blood that was important. It was a sign or a symbol that bound this friendship, that bound the unity, and it sanctified this unity. Blood in the Old Testament was considered life. It came from God and it was used to sanctify and to give life to covenants. And it was even used to ordain new priests, or a new high priest anyway. Blood made things and made people holy. Blood was even a sign of atonement, setting things right. So in the covenant with God, the covenant was sanctified in blood. The covenant of with Abraham was sealed in blood by circumcision when God said to Abraham, "I will be your God and you shall be my people." And it was established, and that's how the Israelite community was established. Moses then was asked by God to lead the Israelites out of the land of Goshen. And blood was used as a sign of the Israelites so that death would pass them by. Remember that? They put blood on the doors. And the angel of death would pass over them. And during the time spent in Sinai, they were building the community of Israel. And it was during that time in the deserts that the 10 Commandments were given to Moses. And after Moses received the 10 Commandments, they were shared with the people. And God asked Moses to bring 70 elders upon the mountain with him. And an animal sacrifice was made. And the blood was splashed on the altar. And after the commandments were read to the people and they agreed, blood was splashed on them. So the Ten Commandments were a covenant between God and his people, blood sanctifying that relationship. And as they tried to live into those commandments, the number grew overwhelmingly. So by the time the Torah was in place, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, which had become known as the Law, and within those 5 books, there were 613 laws in place. Can you imagine? Think about that. I think those are too many laws for anyone. Makes me think of our own society with our proliferation of rules and laws. We often call the Old Covenant the New Testament. A testament is something that serves as a sign or evidence of a fact or even as a witness. We hear most often this word in relation to a person's last will and testament. And it was into this culture, this political environment, this religious world that was sanctified and dominated by the Old Covenant that Jesus came in. And he came because the Old Covenant wasn't working. He came into Jerusalem in triumph on Sunday, and on Monday he overthrew the money changers in the temple. The next day he taught in the temple. The next day he taught in the temple, and he said that the temple would be destroyed and rebuilt in 3 days. We're not told much about what happens Wednesday. I think he probably rested. That's just my own opinion. It was already common knowledge that he had raised Lazarus from the dead and visited with him just a few days before he arrived in town. But he arrived in town a marked man. And then in short, he took on the whole establishment. Political, religious, and cultural, all at the same time, all at once. He knew they would not understand or buy into what he was saying or doing. He had predicted their misunderstanding. He'd even predicted his own arrest and his own death. On Thursday, which we call Maundy Thursday now, he chose to eat the Passover dinner with his disciples in Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the city that killed its prophets. At the meal, he taught the disciples that to be a leader, you must be one who serves. He taught by example. He washed their feet. And then he gave them some bread, as you heard. Take and eat this. This is my body. And after supper, he took the cup and blessed it and said, drink this, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Whenever you drink it, do this in remembrance of me. This new covenant was bound by blood, the blood of the Messiah. A new covenant in his blood with new terms. It created a new people, a people born again, a new Israel born from above, a new Jerusalem, a new city built on a hill, a new ministry, a ministry that continues the work of the Messiah, a new reality of the Messiah to continue the work of Christ in the world, a new beacon of love, and that is the love of God in the world. The triumph and the tragedy, Palm Sunday, Good Friday. Bad things happen when good people do nothing. Amen.